As earlier hinted, the previous modules consisting of stakeholders analysis, problem analysis, objectives analysis, and the results chains analysis were analytical in nature. The succeeding 4 modules are focused and planning. Each module will help us elaborate, clarify, and summarize our solutions roadmaps. Each one will add pieces of information that will allow us to complete the Design and Monitoring Framework or DMF matrix. The DMF will consolidate all the agreements and conclusions achieved by the stakeholders into one common statement describing our proposed project. Before we begin with the first planning module, let us first navigate through the DMF matrix. As you may have already noticed, the matrix has 4 columns and 4 rows. It has the design summary column that consists of impact, outcomes, outputs, activities, and inputs. Then it has the 3 other columns consisting of performance targets and indicators, data sources, and assumptions and risks. We need to complete the 14 cells that make up the DMF matrix. The DMF is similar to the logical framework or log frame, which is commonly used in describing multilateral projects. In this module, we will concentrate on the design summary column. From the results chains analysis module, the stakeholders have declared the changes or solution sets that they can handle or work on. By consolidating the results, they can agree on statements describing the proposed project's impact, outcome, outputs, activities, and inputs. Together, they constitute the design summary statement. Before making these terms clearer, let us first illustrate the transition from the objectives tree to the design summary. The design summary describes the main elements of the proposed project. It also reveals the vertical logic of the DMF. The vertical logic is the means-ends relationship that emerged from the results chain. The vertical logic tests the soundness of the results chain by checking if the inputs are sufficient to carry out the activities, which have to be sufficient to produce the outputs. In turn, outputs are expected to achieve the desired outcome with the completion of the project. The outcome contributes to achieving the impact. A detailed definition of several terms might be in order here. Terms like impact, outcome, outputs, activities, and inputs are defined in a separate handout. You can either read from your monitor or print the definitions. Procedures. Step 1. Formulate the outcome statement. The outcome statement narrates what the proposed project will accomplish after its implementation. It is usually above the appropriate results chain selected. The decision on phrasing the statement determines the nature and scope of the outputs needed to achieve the outcome, the starting point for preparing the DMF. The outcome statement should be limited to one succinct statement to ensure clarity and focus. More than one outcome implies a number of sub-projects or components under one project umbrella. These need to be either rephrased into outputs or summarized into a single statement associated with the relevant indicators outlining the dimensions of the outcome, expressed in a change instead of an action language to reflect accomplishments, phrased as an improvement over a baseline situation, which is described in the performance targets and indicators column. Achievable, subject to assumptions and risks. By the end of the project implementation to be reported on in the project or TA completion report, PCR or TCR, and necessary but not sufficient to achieve the impact. In general, outcome statements describe the change of behavior of the beneficiaries using the project outputs. They also describe performance changes of systems, organizations, and institutions. For example, financial services are more accessible to small enterprises. Public service is more accountable. Outcome should be directly attributable to the project, subject to assumptions and risks, and be achievable by project completion. Examples: rural populations in target provinces use improved secondary health care services. In our earlier example, public bus company provides safe and reliable public transport services. Step 2. Formulate the impact statement. Impact or long-term goal could be the sectoral, subsectoral, or national objectives. it deals with what is the high-level, long-range vision to which this project will contribute. It is influenced by many factors other than the project itself. Note that this project can only contribute and will not be the only intervention to achieve the impact. To search for the candidate statements, go back to the objectives tree. Look for the possible impact statements above the outcome you have chosen. Impact should be similar to or support institutional and sectoral goals. The resulting impact statement links the project with the specific outcomes in the Country Partnership Strategy or CPS. In formulating the impact statement, ensure that it is a direct means-end relationship between the outcome and the impact. It clearly states a desired result and does not phrase an action such as to develop, to contribute, etc. It does not summarize the project logic by using connecting words such as through or by or for. It expresses the expected beneficial consequences or impact on a defined group of people, reflecting that development is about conferring benefits on people. It describes the results that can be measured. Note that poverty reduction should not generally be treated as the impact of a project because there are so many steps between a project and the ultimate poverty reduction goal. Examples: inclusive health services improvement in Transylvania. The health, nutrition, and psychosocial development of the rural population in the 12 poorest provinces have improved. In our earlier example, the transport system of ABC is functioning well. These are good examples of impact statements. They are succinct, specify the impact expected, and aimed at precise target beneficiaries. Step 3. Examine the outputs. Outputs are the physical goods, services, institutional and/or behavioral changes produced by the project. They are necessary to achieve the outcome and the means-end relationship earlier identified. They are what the project will leave behind. Important points to consider for outputs. Each output has to be necessary to achieve the stated outcome. Include only outputs that can be delivered by the project and are feasible with the resources available, considering assumptions and risks. Do not use the infinitive tense. For example, to assess, to prepare, at the beginning of output statements. They imply activities. Components are not outputs. They are a collection of outputs conveniently grouped for finance or administrative purposes. For complex projects, include an output for project management. This summarizes all routine activities, for example, planning, monitoring and evaluation, procurement, reporting, communicating with stakeholders, providing policy inputs, and initiating risk mitigation measures of the project implementation unit. Example outputs. Improved healthcare infrastructure is operational. Health services provided reflect community healthcare needs. Hospital staff applies newly acquired healthcare skills. In our earlier example, the two outputs are: bus fleet is well maintained. Drivers observe safety and traffic regulations. Step 4. Brainstorm the activities per output. Activities are groups of tasks carried out to transform inputs into project outputs. Consider only the main activities, particularly those whose completion represent important implementation milestones. They will detail what, specifically, is the project going to do. For example, build, train, equip, develop policy, draft legislation, conduct surveys, all action statements that start with verbs. Important points to consider for activities. They should not be a restatement of an output as an action. They should be doable given the available inputs. They should include completion dates and/or important milestones. They should form the basis for preparing the implementation schedule and the individual work plans. They should show what needs to be done and how. And together with the respective outputs, they are the starting points for preparing implementation plans and individual work plans. Step 5. Estimate the inputs. Inputs consist of the resources needed by the activities to produce the outputs: consulting services, personnel, civil works, equipment, materials, and operational funds, which are provided by ADB, government, co-financiers, and others, are all examples of inputs. Inputs to be listed should include as a minimum the following: inputs by financier and main cost categories in financial and/or physical terms, in-kind contributions from other stakeholders. While formulating inputs for a project, ask yourself the following questions. Is funding by key cost category, civil works, equipment, consulting services, etc. spelled out? Are complementary inputs by the DMC, co-financiers, private sector, beneficiaries, NGOs, etc. stated in financial or physical terms? Inputs are the main resources, financial and in-kind, provided by ADB, government, co-financiers, private sector, NGOs, beneficiaries, and other stakeholders required to implement the project. Example inputs: ADB, equivalent to $15 million. Consulting services of 50 person months, equivalent to $1.25 million. Civil works, $2 million. Equipment, $8 million. Training, $2.75 million. Contingencies, $1 million. Government, $5 million. Personnel of 150 person months, equivalent to $2 million. Transport and logistics, $1.5 million. Operating expenses, $1.5 million. Beneficiaries, personnel, 200 person months, participation in planning, monitoring, and evaluation. Application. A completed DMF application for a vocational school project is attached. You can download and print the application for your perusal. Zoom in on the narrative summary column and the input cell. Let us continue. The next step is to consider the risks and assumptions.